Dr. Varun Nagaraj, welcome to the Payal Nanjiani Leadership Podcast. It is such an honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Payal. Thank you for having me on your show. A lot of people listen to you, follow you, and it's an honor to be able to be on your show.
Thank you. And I think the honor is and the pleasure is all ours. And before we dive into innovation, and you were just talking recently also, and even now that you are back from an innovation program or something. But before we dive deep into that, what took you into the academic segment, into the academic industry?
Okay. I think a simple three-word answer would be midlife crisis, but I hope I have a more illuminating answer than that. See, I think when you're in the middle of Silicon Valley, for example, for as long as, let's say, I was, you tend to start taking a bunch of things for granted. And there's a certain amount of Silicon Valley or Western innovation hubris that I think can be a little dangerous. For example, the motto we've all followed about move fast and break stuff. The idea is that no matter what, innovation is a good thing. No matter what, creating new things will always result in somehow better human outcomes. And that selfishness is perfectly okay because it eventually trickles down, right? I mean, these are some of the principles that, unfortunately, Silicon Valley or Western innovation is based on. And I think I began to realize in my 40s that not all innovation seems to produce results that are valuable to everybody. And more recently, over the last 5-7 years, as newer technologies like social media, for example, began to come into play, and a wonderful movie like The Social Dilemma started capturing the ill effects of technology, the ill effects of innovation for the sake of innovation, I began to think there's probably a better way of going about being an innovator, that perhaps systematically we need to think of innovation in a different way. And what better way than to potentially try and articulate an approach that future generations of leaders could use, because we're more than halfway into our careers, if you will. If we want to make good change happen, I think it is, certainly we can do it, but it's better to co-opt the next generation into driving the agenda that you wish you had pursued yourself. And I think that was one of the motivations for switching into academia, because it gives a chance to step away from the mad rush, if you will, of the industrial treadmill. And it gives you a chance to articulate your thoughts and I wouldn't say brainwash, but try and convince the next generation that these are things that they could be doing that perhaps can cure the ills that our generation has created.
Okay. So do you think that, just based on what you said, do you think that every student, we'll just talk from there, or every person in the workforce or anybody, all of us have this thing in us to be an innovator?
So it depends on how you define innovation. And to me, the short answer is yes. And I'll tell you why I say yes is my short answer. If you step back and think of what really innovation means, right? It's actually a very simple word. It begins with sort of the NOV inside of innovation, meaning it is the creation of something that is new, right? And this new thing that you're creating doesn't have to be a product or an invention. The new thing can be a way in which you do your work. The new thing can be a new kind of a policy that you create. So newness can come in many forms. And I think all of us, no matter what our jobs are, have to be able to think of new ways of going about our lives or going about our jobs. Otherwise, we would never achieve any new outcomes, because new outcomes are not going to come from old methods. New outcomes, new goals require new methods. And if you look at innovation simply as the creation of new methods, new thoughts, new processes, new policies, I think everybody is an innovator. Now, there is a second part of innovation as well, which is what makes it, innovation as opposed to simple creativity. Innovation requires that whatever these novel thoughts are that you have, the novel ideas, approaches, product ideas, solutions, have to actually be implemented and have to produce some sort of utility or usefulness over and beyond what is already available in society today. Doing something brand new and not really producing any effect, meaning it's really no better results-wise than something that already exists, isn't really innovation. It was probably a creative flight of fancy, a creative exercise, which maybe gave you a lot of pleasure, but I wouldn't call that an innovation. So to be an innovation, it has to be new and it has to be useful. And I think there are lots and lots of circumstances in life outside of what we think of as innovation. When you think about new products and technologies and so on, I think we would all agree that there are many, many instances in life where we have to come up with something new that is useful. And to me, that is innovation. And that is, in fact, the fundamental definition of innovation as scholars would define it.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Varun, is that innovation doesn't have to be big all the time. It's those little daily things where you bring in a new method of doing the thing itself leads to an innovation.
Exactly. That is an innovation. And in fact, scholars will use words like incremental innovation all the way to radical innovation. There's a lovely article or a couple of articles in the Atlantic magazine that tried to describe, or that very well described, sort of the 50 greatest innovations of mankind. And as you would imagine, it's a wonderful list, and it consists of the printing press, the wheel, fire, agriculture. But in there are also social innovations, like, for example, democracy, or a woman's right to equality and to vote, right? These were policies that were taken, and they're innovations as well. And now these were radical innovations, right? I mean, we all agree that these 50 that is written in the Atlantic change the world, but not everything changes the world. Many times innovations or novelty could be less than changing the world. For example, an idea borrowed from one space in another space is still an innovative idea, but it's not like inventing it for the first time. It doesn't make it a bad innovation. It just means that it is less radical, perhaps, than the person that came first. So let's take a look at Amazon. So if we believe from a business model innovation point of view, if we give the credit to Amazon.com for innovating the business model in terms of taking a marketplace and creating a two-sided marketplace online, right? So that was a pretty amazing business model innovation. We all agree it has had tremendous impact on the world. Now, but that idea, that innovation, that you can bring two parties together electronically, has then been applied in multiple industries. For example, Airbnb is nothing more than a marketplace for people who have properties to rent and people who are looking for properties. Similarly, Uber is nothing more than people who have a car and people who are looking for a car. So are those innovations? Absolutely. Nobody is going to say Uber and Airbnb did not innovate, but it's probably not as radical, as maybe the original Amazon innovation. So the point is, innovation is on a spectrum, and we should not be passing judgment saying it only needs to be on the extreme end of the spectrum for it to be called innovation. I think all kinds of innovation that perhaps are even derived innovations can be tremendously useful and can change the world for the better.
Wow. So you said that everyone has it in them to have some innovation. It's just like these little changes, the methods of your daily life. Then what stops us from, bringing that innovation? As, like you said, as small as it could be, as big as it could be. What stops us?
No, that's a great question, right? You think of innovation and say, well, what enables it, right? And then we can talk about maybe what are the barriers to those enablers. And that's probably the answer to your question of what stops us, right? So I'll begin with the enablers of innovation, and then I'll try and figure out what prevents us from creating innovation. And specifically, you're going to hear me harp a lot on something called wise innovation, which I believe is the desirable form of innovation we should aspire to. That's the reason I left Silicon Valley, because while there's probably nothing I can ever teach Silicon Valley about innovation, I do think there's a lot to learn about wise innovation, so I will try and bridge that gap there.
Sure.
So let's begin with just plain old innovation, if you will. And then maybe we talk about what are the barriers to being a plain old innovator. And then let's talk about wise innovation and the barriers to being a wise innovator, which actually are much more significant in my mind. So let's look at the enablers of innovation. Innovation comes about because and there are three parts to innovation, most people will agree. Innovation has a goal. So you consider sort of, there's an outcome that you want. You want to create something innovative, which is new and which is useful, right? So that's the output of innovation. Then there is a process through which you use to create that innovative outcome. And these are processes that some of which, become more or less popular at different points of time. I told you I was just coming back from this amazing design thinking fair that we're having on our campus today. So design thinking is a process for creating innovation. If you believe, and I do, in the Silicon Valley approach to innovation, the lean startup method is essentially the mantra for all Silicon Valley startups. The lean startup method, along with agile, is basically the method or the process through which innovation is done. It is a figure out what you're trying to answer. So experiment, answer those experiments, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. That's what the lean startup method is. Wonderful method that has produced lots and lots of innovations. So one could argue that one barrier to innovation is not being educated in these methods, right? So the enabler, if it is design thinking, if it is a lean startup method, a barrier might be there are a lot of people out there that aren't aware of these particular processes or methods of innovation, even if it's not product related. Even if you're a human resource professional and you're changing the incentive policy, you can use design thinking and you can use the lean startup method to create a better rewards and retention policy for your organization. So lack of awareness of the process is one part. Then there is an aspect of mindset. Innovation does require a few things. Innovation is generally assisted by an entrepreneurial mindset, because an entrepreneurial mindset is a risk-taking mindset. An entrepreneurial mindset is very much outcome-based. Now, it may be done for the wrong reasons sometimes, but the point is it acts as the testosterone, if you will, that drives the innovation process, right? So it's a very good, powerful mindset to have. But just like too much testosterone can be bad, too much entrepreneurial zeal can be bad too, in my opinion, and I'll talk about that. A growth mindset, we would agree, is probably positively correlated to innovation, because growth mindset means you're not limited. You can always figure things out. And so therefore, understanding processes and having these two mindsets of entrepreneurship and growth, I think, are enablers. And so the barriers are when people don't have them. So if you have them, you will drive innovation. Okay. And these things can be taught. And a lot of business schools and a lot of coaching, centers and so forth attempt to teach both the innovation process and try and familiarize people with the innovation mindsets that are required. But I'm on a different horse, beating a different drum, if you will. And the drum that I'm beating around wise innovation is the fact that even if you did all of these, the chances are that the solutions that you're coming up with, the innovative solutions you're coming up with, may not necessarily be the best solutions possible. So let's talk about the best solutions. And I will tie in amazing work done by the United Nations on their Sustainable Development Goals, a person named Elkington on the concept of the triple bottom line. So scholars well before our time have realized that outcomes should be balanced, that a profit motive alone is not the right way to measure an innovation success. However, it does have to make money in some form, right? Otherwise, things aren't sustainable. So it's true. So no one's talking about becoming a communist here or anything like that. But in addition to having profit or creating economic prosperity, a good innovation solution should create societal benefits, right? And societal benefits could be things like health, well-being, employment, equity, and so forth, right? These are societal benefits. And a good innovation ideally should create environmental benefits, or at the very least, not do environmental harm. And I think we're all definitely familiar with lots and lots of great innovations that perhaps did societal harm. Yeah. And one might point at Facebook.
Yes.
Facebook might be an example of a great innovation that produced a whole bunch of unintended societal harm. And then there are all kinds of other innovations that have produced environmental damage unintentionally as well. And I think we're familiar with many of those kinds of innovations. Maybe drinking water in plastic bottles, while it produced actually positive economic outcome and a societal outcome, because it improved the health of many people who didn't have access to clean water, certainly produced a negative environmental outcome, right? So a wise innovation is something that tries to balance these three P's, as they call it, the profit motive, the people motive, and the planet motive, and tries to be what I would call net positive, that net, these three things are on the positive side of the ledger sheet, right? So that's sort of what you're looking to do. So wise innovator looks at outcomes a little differently than just a regular old Silicon Valley innovator, in my mind, right? Now, let's look at...
Dr. Varun, is it just, I wanted to hold on here, is it fair then to say that wise innovation has to have a deep-ended purpose?
Yes. In fact, there's a lovely book by Ranjay Gulati of Harvard Business School, where he talks about this phrase called deep purpose. And he lays it out very nicely. He sort of says businesses are driven either on a economic logic, right, which means profit dominates everything else. But there are businesses and NGOs and other organizations that are driven on a societal logic, in which case societal and environmental benefits might trump everything else. But the trick is to not favor one or the other. The trick is, can you have it all, right? Can you basically have an economic logic applied at the same time as a societal logic? Can you create these three P's together? And the answer is you can. And that's what he refers to as sort of deep purpose. Now, what he doesn't get into is the link between deep purpose and innovation, right? The point, though, is to achieve this kind of deep purpose is going to require us to do new things. And as I defined innovation, the creation of new things is what innovation is. And therefore, when you're creating new things, if you begin with the outcome that you want this triple bottom line or a balanced, outcome, then you have to say, are my processes good enough, to produce that outcome? And are my mindsets good enough? So this is where you go back to the people who may have been great innovators, but perhaps are not yet wise innovators. And you
Okay.
sort of say, well, tell me about the processes you use. And the person says, hey, I use design thinking. I use the lean startup method. And look, I've been very successful in innovating and creating great products.
Mm.
But now you sort of say, well, if we were trying to do more than just create a great product that had economic value, we are trying to achieve this kind of a balanced outcome that we're talking about. Are those processes you're using enough? Will design
Okay.
thinking by itself produce the kind of outcome we would really like? Would lean startup method by itself produce the kind of outcome we would like? And the answer that I would have for them is no, I think you need to actually think about these processes a little bit differently. For example, systems thinking is a wonderful technique developed at MIT that is actually not used as much as it should be used. So systems thinking would actually
Yeah.
have you understand the big picture really, really well before you start design thinking, and that is a simple way of bringing some wisdom, if you will, into design thinking, starting with the big picture that systems thinking lays out for you.
Mm.
There's a wonderful school of thinking from the European Union and faculty and the universities there called responsible innovation. And they lay out an interesting approach by which the innovator assumes responsibility for the outcome. And what is it they should do to be responsible innovators? So, there are these emerging thoughts, some old, like systems thinking, some new, like responsible innovation, that I think have in them a whole bunch of ideas that need to be added on to these core innovation processes like design thinking and the lean startup method and so on. So wise innovator from a process point of view is exposed to more than just the lean startup method, is exposed to more than design thinking. They're exposed to systems thinking, they're exposed to responsible innovation, and they know how to basically bring it all together. That plurality of processes is what is going to produce the right kind of outcome. And so from a teaching point of view, coming back to the topic about teaching future leaders, to me, a lot of business schools, of course, have courses on innovation and so forth. I would like to think what makes us different is we realize that you need something a little bit more in order to be a wise innovator. And so within our curriculum, within our corporate engagements and so on, these other things I talked about are going to be topics as well, besides the
Wow.
standard innovation toolkit. Now, one other thing, and I do know I talk a lot, Payal, but
No, no, no.
I want
I'm enjoying the way you are putting everything together, and that's why I was listening. That the way you explained the wise innovation, I was really awestruck with that.
So the one part I'll call out, and we can get into the mindsets. When we were talking earlier, you had asked about innovation mindsets, and I did say, the entrepreneurial mindset and the growth mindset are extremely important for innovation. The
Right.
entrepreneurial mindset being like testosterone that's needed for athletic performance, right? But we talked about too much testosterone. So let's look at a couple of other mindsets that we think act as a counterbalance, to the entrepreneurial mindset and produces a good outcome that is not only entrepreneurial, but is also more than that. And the two mindsets that we at SPJMR focus a lot on is something called the wisdom mindset and something called the paradox mindset. So the wisdom mindset is a wonderful, wonderful concept. It draws upon the wisdom literature that begins with the Greeks, with the Aristotle and Socrates. You begin with the definition of what is wisdom, what is practical wisdom, and so on. Simultaneously, in India and in other parts of Asia, there's a lot of discourse about what is wisdom. The Bhagavad Gita is basically a book of wisdom. It is advising you what to do. So all aspects of wisdom are trying to tell the common person, how should you live the right life? What does right even mean? And that's what is common between the East and the West. Now, what scholars have done over the last 2,000, 3,000 years is boil all of this down into this concept called the wisdom mindset. And it consists of 4 or 5 principles, some of which run opposite to the entrepreneurial mindset. For example, if the entrepreneurial mindset is all about the resources that you have and what you can do as fast as possible with the resources that you have, the wisdom mindset basically says, why are you limiting it to just yourself? A wise man is basically a compassionate person who's thinking about its impact on lots and lots of people and what life will be. That's typically not a concern of the entrepreneurial mindset. The wisdom mindset also says, like in the Pixar movie Cars, I always quote the Pixar movies because I watched every single one with my kids, right?
I've
And
done
one of
too.
them,
Yeah.
notion of, yes, they're great movies. So there's one lovely scene from the movie Cars where, this wise old driver tells the young driver, car, of course, turn left to go right, right? So sometimes you have to do these things. You have to go slow to go fast, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think what the wisdom mindset with its focus on compassion and centeredness and mindfulness does, it slows you down, right? It slows down the thinking, but it actually enables the entrepreneurial process and maybe channels it in the right direction. So teaching people the wisdom mindset, and I'll tell you how we teach it, but teaching people the wisdom mindset, I think makes the innovation mindset pool that much richer.
Okay.
The paradox mindset is something that has recently come into vogue, and a lot of stuff being written about people's ability to deal with paradoxes. Now, if you're an innovator and I tell you, hey, you need to balance people, profit, and planet, and you sort of say they seem like incompatible goals. And to some degree, sometimes in the short term, they are, right? I mean, you have to
Right. Yeah.
prioritize one over the other. But I'm asking you, you can have it all. And you step back and say, that seems like a paradox, right? How do you do it all? Similarly, I turn to you and say, you need to be wise and slow and compassionate and deliberate, and yet you need to be aggressive and fast and ego-driven because both are
Paradox.
important.
Yeah.
And that's another paradox, right? So it turns out research is showing that there are some people who are really good and comfortable with paradoxes. So when they're faced with a paradox, they actually get energy from it. And there are other people, when they're faced with a paradox, they look at it and say, this is a losing cause. So
Absolutely.
we feel
Yeah.
innovative leaders should have a paradox mindset. Now, the point is, can we as business school educators help improve both the wisdom mindset and the paradox mindset for our students and for our corporate clients? And we believe we have created a whole set of experiential learnings and experiential approaches to do precisely that, right? And that's why I feel I'm in the good space, in the right space, because in an educational institution, it allows you the freedom to try some of these things. Some of them experimentally work out, some of them don't. You're not bound by any sort of prejudice. You go where the data takes you. And I think the data is showing us that a paradox mindset and a wisdom mindset result in a better type of innovation. So we take, now, wise innovation is a total SPJMR phrase. If you did a search on it, you probably won't find a whole lot. Maybe in 3 years, a lot with SPJMR affiliated with it. But phrases like responsible innovation, purpose-driven innovation, sustainable innovation are all actually talking about the same outcome. Where wise innovation is a little different is it is saying that in order to achieve that outcome, you have to basically draw upon a wisdom mindset. You have to draw upon a paradox mindset. You have to look at processes much more broadly than you historically used to look at. And part of wisdom is there's a wonderful phrase, Payal, called epistemological humility. It sounds like a mouthful. Well, what does it
Yeah.
mean? Epistemological humility. Epistemology is how you learn. So epistemological humility basically is saying that there are many, many paths to realization, right? Which many of us know is true in lots of spiritual approaches. That there are no singular truths. There are many ways you can get to the end goal, and always be humble that there's probably a method that you're not yet comfortable with that may prove to be a better method. And what I'm
So,
proposing from a process point of view is you may be a lean startup expert. Doesn't matter. If you showed that wisdom principle of epistemological humility, you would add on systems thinking. You would add on these other things to be an even better innovator. All right,
so
I'll shush for now, Payal.
no, no,
Your
I
question.
liked what you said. I liked what you said that, you need to have the process, you need to have the method. But a lot of people, they wait for perfection. Has innovation got to do anything with perfection?
No, not at all. And I'll actually use a phrase I didn't use. We're familiar with the phrase jugaad innovation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you and I both come from a culture where we know what jugaad is. And for those that don't know what jugaad is, it's a uniquely Indian way of doing innovation that is not practiced necessarily in industry. It's just how the common people get by day-to-day life.
Yeah, in
And
fact,
jugaad
Howard has done a lot of research on that work, on
on
this
jugaad
word.
innovation.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
exactly right. So jugaad innovation is about saying, listen, sometimes you don't have the resources you need. You don't have the materials you need. You may not even know why something works, but just go ahead and with what you have, try it and make it work, right? That's basically what jugaad is.
Yeah, yeah.
Jugaad is the opposite of perfection, right? Jugaad is about just good enough innovation, if you think about it. Just to overcome the situation in front of you. So I don't think innovation and perfection are related at all. Innovation is a constant effort to solve a problem in a new way.
Mhm.
And sometimes, these things fail. and sometimes they work, but they're only going to work for a small period of
Small
time.
period of time. Yeah.
Like, and sometimes they might, they might come close to perfection, but what is perfect, Payal? Even the greatest inventions we can think of have not been perfect, right? The greatest innovations, the printing press, which almost all the authors in the Atlantic agreed that the printing press was the greatest innovation of mankind. And the reason, and there were so many scholars and people who run companies and so on who agreed with that phrase. Padma Shri Warrior, who's the chief technology officer of CTO, was one of the people who actually participated in that. And the reason they all called out the printing press as the greatest innovation of all was the fact that it was essentially the start of democratizing knowledge. And today our entire economy is based on democratized knowledge. It would have never happened without the printing press. Knowledge would have been the domain of just a few elite, God-chosen people, and everybody else had to take orders from them or the king, right? So, okay, so now the point is, was the printing press perfect? Well, let's look at all the imperfections of the printing press. One could argue, if you really wanted to be kind of argumentative, you could sort of say, can you think of all the forests and trees that have been destroyed to basically produce books, right? So one would argue that one of the downsides of the printing press was that it caused ecological harm, right? So it produces a whole amount of societal good, but you could argue it caused ecological harm. The printing press is the basis of the modern internet, and we would all agree that the modern internet and social media is anything but perfect. So I would almost say, by definition, innovation can never be perfect.
Perfect. I think that's a great answer to give, because we all wait for that perfection, that when it's perfect, then that's the time when I'm going to do it. But what would be your one piece of greatest advice to people who want to succeed in their career life?
Okay. I have to obviously provide this kind of sage advice to my graduating students on a regular basis. So to me, if you just go a little bit away from innovation, but it's kind of related still, to me, curiosity is in fact the most important trait that you could have, right? Just being curious about how things are, what things are, how they work, and being somewhat fearless about learning new things. Again, so it's fearless curiosity, I think, is really the foundation. Because if you're curious and you're fearless, you'll find out that there are things that are not quite right, right? And if you have a heart, you're basically going to sort of say, well, how could I make something better? Or what can I do that doesn't currently exist? And I think innovation will automatically spring for those that are innovation inclined. And as I said, everybody has an opportunity to innovate and do something better. But curiosity is, I think, what brings about that humility, that there's always new information coming in. Curiosity also tells you there is no such thing as perfection. I think curiosity keeps the brain sharp, right? So I think sort of curiosity along with humility probably is kind of and what they would call the antecedents of, I think, good innovation.
That's so well put, Dr. Varun. Before we wrap up, I want to take you through the leadership rapid fire round.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now I'm nervous, right? Because
No,
I think we overthink lots of things.
Whatever comes to your mind, the first thing, either in a word or a one-liner, is what I'm looking for.
Okay, I'll probably go with a one-liner, or I'll try and do my best to do it in a single word. But yes, I'll follow the rules.
Let's see. So, what's the one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
That failure is an option.
Failure is an option. Okay, that's nice. What's your personal mantra, or any type of a quote that helps you throughout your day?
Personal mantra or coach that helps throughout the day. Have fun.
Have fun. So that's what you're doing while having your innovations programs. Okay.
Indeed, and I'm enjoying our chat here, Payal, right? I think as long as you're having fun, I think you're healthy and your brain's working and you're trying to do the right thing.
Right. That's nice, because I think having fun is very important in your day-to-day life while you're working. Otherwise, work really drags, So that's
Indeed.